are in beautiful France, and I have been given the keys to both a Mclaren 720S and 570S Spider, two very different cars with a similar purpose: to be incredibly engaging to drive on the road, capable on the track, and practical for everyday use. McLaren has broken their lineup up into three series. We have the Sports Series, which consists of the McLaren 570S, 570S Spider, and 570 GT. And then in Europe, we also have a 540C. That is the entry-level, more playful McLaren, but don't get me wrong, it is still very fun to drive. Now, the 570 GT is the more practical McLaren. It's got more space in the rear, and finally, they've added an option on the GT to add back in some of the components of the S to make it more fun to drive, yet it has the additional cargo room. Next, we have the Super Series, where McLaren's full-fledged sports car, the 720S, sits. In fact, the 720S has such a good mix of power and refinement that they've sold more 720Ss in the last 6 months than they ever did 650Ss in a year. At the top lies the Ultimate Series, McLaren's most prestigious, expensive, and uncompromised cars, where the McLaren P1 used to sit. We've now got the Senna, which is a track-focused monster that they've actually made road legal. After that, we'll have the BP23, the Bespoke Project 2 with 3 seats. That's the hyper luxury GT that's focused all about speed, and essentially the true successor to the McLaren F1. They're only making 500 Sennas and 106 BP23s, and all of them are already sold out. But today is all about the 720S. So let's hop in and take it for a spin.
Playing with temptation, searching for salvation. Can we find our way back, way back? Caught up in confusion, need a resolution. Can we find our way back, way back? No more running.
Behind the wheel of the 720S now, and it is truly remarkable what they've done with this. The fact that its performance figures are basically on par with hypercars, yet this can truly, more than any other car at this performance level, be used on a daily basis, is really staggering. So the first insane feature of the 720S is its performance. So behind me, in the previous generation car, the 12C. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but the 12C was technically the predecessor to this. The 650S was more of a mid-cycle refresh. They fixed the front end a bit, made it faster, but it wasn't a truly new car. The 720S is. The motor has been enlarged from 3.8 to 4 liters now, 4-liter twin turbocharged V8, making, get this, 710 horsepower and 568 pound-feet of torque. But the craziest part is, McLaren has very much underestimated and understated the power of the 720, whether that's to keep P1 customers happy, to leave room for higher-end models, we're not sure, but dynos have shown that 710 horsepower is way below what this actually makes. In fact, it was dynoed at 690 horsepower to the wheels using a rear-wheel drivetrain loss of about 15%, which is pretty standard. That puts the crank horsepower of the 720 much closer, if not maybe even slightly above, 800 horsepower. Okay, acceleration statistics. Get this, 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, according to Motor Trend. For a rear-wheel drive car, well, for any car on the planet, hypercar or not, 2.5 seconds is absurd, but especially for something that's rear-wheel drive, and that allows it to be lighter, more nimble, more playful in the corners, yet it still has that initial grip off the line. That's in part due to their very advanced launch control, traction control, and power management. 0 to 124 miles an hour in the low 6-second range. And the most impressive statistic, the quarter mile in 9.9 seconds at 141 miles an hour. In fact, I went to a half-mile event where this car raced a Porsche 918, and in the half mile, it was practically identical with the same trap speed, 169 to 170 miles an hour, as a $1 million plus 918 Spider. And in a sense, this car is the bargain of the century. It starts at $285,000, which of course is a lot of money. But when you compare it to its competitors and the cars above it, it really starts to make a lot of sense. The Lamborghini Huracan, even the Performante, 631 horsepower, also weighs significantly more than this. This only weighs 3,124 pounds. Even the Performante, the lightweight, more hardcore version that's really supposed to compete with whenever they come out with the LT version of the 720, is heavier and has less power. The 488 still has less power, it weighs more. The 488 Pista, which is their hardcore track focus variant, nowhere near as daily drivable as the 720, still has the same power as this car and weighs slightly more. And even though that car has come out several years later, I still think it's going to be slower than a standard 720S. Second up is the 720S's usability. From a practicality standpoint, from a daily drivability standpoint, the 720S is an amazing car even if you forego all of the performance benefits, which of course are the highlights of the 720S. Get this, for instance, because it's rear-wheel drive, it doesn't have all the drivetrain components in the front, allowing it to have a much larger trunk than the Lamborghini Huracan. It's got 5.4 cubic feet of storage in the front trunk, big enough to carry on bags to take on an airplane, easily enough to take this car for a weekend trip. In the back, because of this rear parcel shelf, we've got 7.4 additional cubic feet of space, making it even more practical. Additionally, the visibility in the 720S is sublime, better than any other supercar. The front windscreen is massive, allowing you from a performance benefit to see very well in front of you because of the way the hood slopes down. It almost feels like you're positioned directly on the road like a go-kart. We've got big side windows. In fact, there's even windows in the roof to make it more of an airy feeling. The C-pillars themselves even have windows in them, so when looking over your shoulder, you don't have blind spots. That is a rare thing in most cars, let alone a supercar, and because the A-pillars are made from carbon fiber, they can be thinner, and you've got more visibility there as well. Additionally, because of Proactive Chassis Control 2, which has a plethora of sensors all throughout the car scanning the road to allow maximum performance on the track, a stiffer suspension setup with limited body roll, but also maximum comfort when you're on the road. If you put the handling switch into comfort as well as the powertrain, the ride is supple, it's smooth. You could do a very long commute in this car. In fact, I've been driving in it for a couple hours now, and I haven't once thought, oh, this is slightly uncomfortable. The seats themselves hold you in place nicely, but aren't too firm. They aren't too tight either, so even if you're a slightly larger individual, you can in fact fit in these seats. Now, Proactive Chassis Control 2 has 12 additional sensors as compared to the 650S, so it's even better in every situation. Another facet of practicality is traction. You would expect driving up in the French mountains with snow all around, it's cold outside, in a rear-wheel drive car with 710 horsepower to be quite the treacherous experience. Well, in the 720S, because of its advanced traction control, we've actually got snow tires on the car right now. You can put the power down at above 40 miles an hour really efficiently. In fact, I'm able to go flat out in many cases, and even if you punch it in first gear, the way the power comes on is really linear and smooth, especially for a twin turbocharged car. You'd expect it to have turbo lag, which really isn't noticeable whatsoever, but to be able to punch it and have the power come on in that much of a linear fashion, even when it's damp out in a rear-wheel drive car in a cold scenario, that is impressive. Next up, we have McLaren's folding driver display, another extremely unique part of the 720S, and definitely one of the most insane features. That's right, the driver display, the instrument cluster, the speedo, the tachometer, fully digital, customizable, looks great, actually is able to fold out of the way for a cleaner, more visible driving experience. What do I mean by that? And it's almost staggering when I think of it from an engineering perspective. Nobody's done this before. Why would McLaren do that? Why did they decide, you know what? We should just have the driver display fold, and you don't really understand the usefulness of it until you activate it. So there's two ways to do so. You can put the car in track mode. We've just done that now. The driver display folds down. You've got increased visibility, so you can see even more of the road, and you also have a limited display, so you can stay more focused and not distracted. You've got everything you need, a horizontally positioned tachometer, as well as the current speed limit, your current speed, and the gear you're in. That's all you need, and you're able to see more of the road. You can also, if you want to be in comfort mode and fold the screen down, there's a button to the left of the steering wheel where you can manually fold the screen back up. Another thing that McLaren thought of that you didn't know you needed until you actually have it. Unbelievable innovation. Fourth up is the loud start. This is really unique, and I haven't seen any other car that does this. So on the 720S, you can get the sports exhaust upgrade, which is 30% louder than the standard exhaust. And in my opinion, absolutely mandatory, because the 720S, it feels a little bit understated when you don't have it, but the sports exhaust also comes with something really cool, or really obnoxious depending upon how you think of it, but it is one of my favorite features. Essentially, you are able to start the car up in a louder, more showy fashion than a normal mode. So you click the engine start stop button without your foot on the brake, so it powers it up. Then you put the car into track, click the active panel, and then when you fire the car up, it crackles and pops and over revs. It gives extra fuel into the exhaust that ignites when the car is warm, and it sounds epic. Let's do it. Start button on, track mode, active, start the engine. Two pops, that's awesome. Lastly, and one of the coolest features of the Mclaren 720S is variable drift control. That's right, drift modes are popular nowadays, even in sedans. The E63 and the M5 can go from all-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive, allowing you to drift the cars. But a supercar that actually aids you in a drift, that is something special. So how do you activate variable drift control, and what exactly does it do? Well, if you put the car into track mode and you press ESC off, on the screen pops up a variable drift control. Click OK to enter it. So we've clicked OK now, activate. And on the screen pops up the coolest graphic I have ever seen. It is a 720S in the middle of a turn on a racetrack drifting. And at the bottom of the screen, we can actually toggle through the slip angle, and it shows you the difference in degrees in an actual image on the screen. So if we click the minus, the slip angle is reduced, and it shows you an image of that on the display. If we click plus for a massive slide, there we go. Now, McLaren claims that this is actually to aid in performance, to give the driver more confidence on the track, to slip the car a little bit, to perform a bit of a slide, and still have you be saved in the end. Now, how is this different than traction control? Well, with traction control on, this car really isn't going to let you slide. With traction control all the way off in a rear-wheel drive 700 horsepower car, yeah, it's gonna let you slide, and slide very, very intensely. For those who are skilled at driving, who know how to drift, this isn't a button where you click it, you turn the steering wheel, and all of a sudden you perform a perfect drift. But to help build your confidence, you click that mode, and the car will save you in the end, but it allows you a pretty severe angle of slip before the driver aids kick in. How awesome is that? All right, I think it's time to have a little fun now that we've gone over the features. We are in one of the most incredible roads I have driven. Oh, there we go. That was that variable drift control kicking in there. We are on one of the most incredible roads I have ever driven in my entire life, up in France, in a 720S. Honestly, the power, guys, it's out of this world. I mean, the fact that this isn't a hypercar is incredible. It's staggering nowadays what supercars have come to. The benchmark has been set so high by McLaren. I'm curious to see how the other auto manufacturers are going to respond to this car. I think initially, auto journalists were not quite sure what the point of the 720S is. It's a little bit more refined, it's a little bit more comfortable than its competitors, yet it's way faster. They just set a crazy lap record at Big Willow, 4 seconds faster than a Porsche 918, and when you really start to push it, that's when you understand the true purpose of the 720S. And it really is unadulterated fun that you can actually experience every day, even with snow all around me in the mountains. Of course, with all McLarens, the paddles mounted on the steering wheel have a rocker setup. You can push the right paddle forwards for a downshift and pull it backwards for a brutal upshift. Oh, I love this car. It also offers a ton of luxurious amenities. I mean, the entire interior is covered in leather. We've got the upgraded Bowers & Wilkins sound system that sounds fantastic. I'm just blown away by this thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you want a car that's very fun, playful, fast, but don't want to spend the money of a 720S, the 570S Spider actually is a good option. It's not just the baby, cheaper, entry-level McLaren that, whatever, you buy that if you can't afford a 720S. It truly isn't. It's lightweight, it's very fun to drive, and for $208,000, you can get it as a Spider. Some performance statistics on it: 3.8 liter twin turbocharged V8 as opposed to the 4 liter here, 562 horsepower, and 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Sure, it's not 0 to 60 in 2.5, but trust me, I drove these two back to back and I was actually shocked. I thought after hopping out of the 720, I'd go, wow, the 570 really is a lot slower. It will still blow your mind in terms of power. I do wish the steering was a bit heavier in the 570S coming out of the 720. It feels a bit heavier, but other than that, the interior quality feels every bit as good as its more expensive brother. Very tossable, fun to drive, and with that open top experience. Even in the cold here, we are blasting the heat, had heated seats on. Utter joy. Well guys, there you have it, the 5 insane features of the McLaren 720S, as well as a little review of the 570S Spider up in the Alps. Special thanks to McLaren Automotive for providing the two cars. Seriously, this has been a fantastic experience. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next video.